We begin tonight with politics and the largest voting night of this year to date. Yesterday, more than 6 million Americans went to the polls in party primary contests across 8 states. The battle to control Congress was front and center, but there were revealing elections in key Senate and gubernatorial races, too.
Tonight we made history.
It was a good night for Democrat Deborah Haaland in New Mexico's 1st congressional district, where she's aiming to be the first Native American woman elected to Congress.
Our win is a victory for working people, a victory for women, a victory for Indian country.
She was one of the many women with primary victories Tuesday, building on a good year so far for female candidates. Other winners included Republican Kristi Noem, the first woman gubernatorial nominee in South Dakota, and Democrat Deidre DeJear, the first African-American nominee for statewide office in Iowa. Also in the Hawkeye State's 1st District, 28-year-old State Representative Abby Finkenauer decisively won the Democratic nomination. If voters send her to Washington in November, she'll be the youngest woman ever elected to Congress.
So many folks are just ready for change and new energy, and that's what you're seeing tonight.
But for some incumbents, there were challenges. In Alabama, Representative Martha Roby came in first, but was forced into a runoff. She faced backlash from Republican voters for her public announcement in October 2016 that she would not vote for Mr. Trump, just one day after an Access Hollywood tape surfaced of him making lewd comments about women.
I've been running on my conservative record, and I'm going to continue to do that.
Roby will face former Democratic representative turned Trump supporter Bobby Bright next month. In New Jersey, Democratic U.S. Senator Robert Menendez faced a tougher than expected challenge from a relatively unknown opponent. His win came a little more than a month after the Senate Ethics Committee severely admonished the two-term incumbent, and months after the U.S. Department of Justice dropped a corruption case against him. But the biggest prize of the night for both parties came in California, where by law, the top 2 vote-getters in a race advance, no matter their party. Despite having multiple contestants, Democrats avoided shutouts and will have candidates on November's ballot in 7 districts that Hillary Clinton won in 2016, but that are represented now by Republicans. In the California governor's race, it was Republicans who avoided a shutout and the specter of depressed general election turnout. Businessman John Cox, who recently got the national GOP's backing, came in second to the Democratic Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom. In a state where Democratic voters outnumber Republicans nearly 2-1, Newsom quickly tried to turn the race into a referendum on President Trump.
And it looks like voters will have a real choice this November between a governor who's going to stand up to Donald Trump and a foot soldier in his war on California.
For more on those election results, I'm joined now by Stuart Rothenberg. He's senior editor at Inside Elections. And Scott Shafer. He's a senior editor for PBS station KQED in San Francisco. And welcome to both of you to the program. So, Stu, I'm going to start with you. What did each party need to do yesterday, and did they do it?
Well, I think the Democrats needed to get candidates to the November ballot in California, and they needed to show well in a number of other states, in Iowa and New Jersey, where there were significant contests. I think they did that. It looks that way. There was all this hand-wringing that maybe in California's top 2 process that the Democrats would be shut out of a few districts. That didn't seem to happen. So that was good. The Republicans got a candidate, the statewide candidate, that was concerned that they wouldn't have anybody in either the statewide races. John Cox appears to be
This is still
in
California.
in California, yeah. So I think they got that. But I don't see any fundamental shift in the election cycle because of these contests. I don't think there were any new races on the board. I don't think there were races that were on the board that are now off the board.
Well, we're going to talk about some of those other states in a minute, but I do want to turn to California. Scott Shafer, let's talk about that governor's race. Democrats had wanted they wanted both of the top 2 slots, so the Republicans wouldn't have anybody on the ballot in November. They didn't get that. Tell us a little bit about what happened.
Yeah, well, we have that top two primary. And of course, Gavin Newsom, the lieutenant governor, had said very openly that he'd love to run against a Republican for all the reasons you mentioned at the top, Judy. It's a much easier race for him. If, say, Antonio Villaraigosa, the Democrat from Los Angeles, had come in second, it would have set up a very different contest, probably a much closer election for Gavin Newsom because Villaraigosa had run a little bit to his right. But that didn't happen, in part because President Trump weighed in. Kevin McCarthy, the majority leader who's from Bakersfield, California, got the president to endorse John Cox a couple of weeks before the election. And that really put the thumb on the scale for him. And of course, Kevin McCarthy wants to become Speaker, and he can only do that if the Republicans hold on to the majority. And without a Republican at the top of the ticket, Republicans were worried that the turnout in November would be low. So they've avoided that.
So they're hoping they've got extra energy. They're going to have a name at the top of the ticket in all across the state. But let's talk about those, what is it, half a dozen or so congressional races in California where Democrats were trying to make inroads. These are districts where Hillary Clinton won in 2016, but these are districts now represented by Republicans. Tell us quickly about those.
Right. So in San Diego, for example, Darrell Issa is the current Republican member of Congress. He is retiring, as is Ed Royce, who's in Orange County, a little bit to the north. And so before they retired, a lot of Democrats piled into those races thinking they were going to run off against the Republican incumbent. And so when those Republicans retired, it created this problem for Democrats, like, oh my goodness, we're going to split up the pie into too many slices and Democrats are going to get shut out. That did not happen. It's still going to be, difficult or at least a challenge for Democrats to pick up those seats, but they're much better positioned than they might have been, especially down in San Diego, where the first place finisher was a Republican, but the next three are all Democrats. We're still going to have to wait and see until all the ballots are counted which Democrat comes in second, but they're looking really good down there.
So, Stu, let's come back to some of these other states and talk about what looks good and what may be a worry for each one of the parties. Democrats happy about Iowa because they may have a shot at the governor's race?
Fred Hubbell, the former CEO of Equitable Life, is the nominee. He won the primary comfortably. It was a very crowded race. Look, this is not a top-tier opportunity for Democrats, but it has moved from off the table to probably on the table. It's one worth watching. And Democrats got two really strong congressional candidates, both women, in the 1st and the 3rd district. So I think they're enthusiastic about Iowa.
And Stu, New Jersey. Robert Menendez had been facing a lot of ethical challenges, court cases and so forth. He's gotten beyond that,
right.
But his vote was less this time.
Right, he won with about 60% of the primary vote. It was, frankly, an embarrassing showing for the senator, and it's a reflection of his ethics issues and the bad press he's been getting. And the ethics committee admonished him. But he's going to win in November. It's New Jersey. It's the Trump midterm election. That's not going to happen. Democrats actually had a really terrific night in New Jersey, I thought. They got good candidates. They're well-positioned to take 2 open seats and to take on Leonard Lance, the Republican incumbent. I think New Jersey could be a real Democratic big night.
And one other race, too, I want to ask you about is Alabama. Martha Roby, we mentioned her. She was one of the very few Republicans who was critical of President Trump after the Access Hollywood tape before the election in 2016. Here we are 2 years later, and it looks like it may have taken some toll in the Republican primary.
This is the bizarro world race, it seems to me. Martha Roby has a runoff against Bobby Bright for the Republican nomination. Bobby Bright is a former Democratic congressman who lost to Martha Roby in the general election in 2010. But Bobby Bright has embraced Donald Trump, and Martha Roby is having to explain why she was critical of the now president. Look, the grassroots, particularly in Alabama, very supportive of Donald Trump.
Speaking of Donald Trump, Scott Schaefer, back to you in California. We know the polls show he is not very popular there, but Republicans believe they can make some inroads and in places where he is popular.
Well, that's true. In places like Orange County, he's less unpopular than he was, say, a year ago. I wouldn't say he's popular. But at the statewide level, I mean, John Cox, I think, used Trump's endorsement to get into the top 2. But as a statewide race, having Donald Trump's endorsement and sort of hitching your wagon to Donald Trump is not a formula for success for a statewide election. The last time a Republican won a statewide race, Judy, in California was 2006. His name was Schwarzenegger. And so John Cox, not very well known. He's going to have a very tall order, in trying to run a very competitive race against Gavin Newsom come the fall.
So many races to keep our eyes on. Scott Schaefer, Stu Rothenberg, thank you both.
Thanks, Judy.
Thank you.